Hey guys, how's it going? I'm gonna do something different now. I'm gonna read a book. I'm obviously not gonna read the whole book because that would take forever, but I'm gonna read a little bit of it. This is the book, The Call of the Wild. It is by Jack London. It is pretty old, originally published in 1906, something like that, 1903. So it's an older book. The language is a little bit different, but it's also got beautifully written descriptions that I think that you can enjoy, especially because it's a movie and a lot of you have probably already seen it. So I'm not going to read actually a chapter a day. I'm probably going to read about 10 minutes worth every day, just so that we can kind of get, I don't want it to be too long because I want you to be able to do other things. Also, I'm outside today because it's so beautiful, but that obviously will not happen every day. This is kind of a strange one. So if you hear weird sounds or see me looking around, it's usually because I'm hearing something, helicopter or something, I don't know, traffic. But here we go. So we're going to start chapter 1 of Into the Wild. Into the Primitive. Buck did not read the newspapers, or he would have known that trouble was brewing, not alone for himself, but for every Tidewater dog, strong of muscle and with warm, long hair, from Puget Sound to San Diego, because men, groping in the Arctic darkness, had found a yellow metal, and because steamships and transportation companies were booming the find, thousands of men were rushing into the Northland. These men wanted dogs, and the dogs they wanted were heavy dogs with strong muscles by which to toil in furry coats to protect them from the frost. Buck lived at a big house in the sun-kissed Santa Clara Valley. Judge Miller's place, it was called. It stood back from the road, half hidden among the trees, through which glimpses could be caught of the wide, cool veranda that ran around its four sides. The house was approached by gravel driveways which wound about through widespread lawns and under interlacing boughs of tall poplars. At the rear, things were on even a more spacious scale than at the front. There were great stables where a dozen grooms and boys held forth, rows of vine-clad servants' cottages, and an endless and orderly array of outhouses, long great arbors, green pastures, orchards, and berry patches. Then there was the pumping plant for the artesian well and the big cement tank where Judge Miller's boys took their morning plunge and kept cool in the hot afternoon. And over this great I can't pronounce some of these words, just so you know. Over the great Demesne, Buck ruled. Here he was born, and here he had lived for the 4 years of his life. It was true there were other dogs. There could not but be other dogs on so vast a place, but they did not count. They came and went, resided in the populous kennels, or lived obscurely in the recesses of the house after the fashion of Toots, the Japanese pug, and Isbel, the Mexican hairless. Strange creatures that rarely put nose out of doors or set foot to ground. On the other hand, there were the fox terriers, a score of them at least, who yelped in fearful promises at Toots and Isbel, looking out of the window at them and protected by the legion of housemaids armed with brooms and mops. But Buck was neither house dog nor kennel dog. The whole realm was his. He plunged into the swimming tank and went hunting with the judge's boys. He escorted Molly and Alice, the judge's daughters, on long twilight or early morning rambles. On wintry nights, he lay at the judge's feet before a roaring library fire. He carried the judge's grandsons on his back or rolled them in the grass and guarded their footsteps through wild adventures down to the fountain in the stable yard, and even beyond, when the paddocks were in the berry patches. Among the terriers, he stalked imperiously, and Toots and Isbel he utterly ignored, for he was king over all the creeping, crawling, flying things of Judge Miller's place, humans included. His father, Elmo, a huge St. Bernard, had been the judge's inseparable companion, and Buck did fair to follow in the ways of his father. He was not so large, he weighed only 140 pounds, for his mother, Shep, had been a Scotch shepherd dog. Nevertheless, 140 pounds, to which was added the dignity that came of good living and universal respect, enabled him to carry himself in right royal fashion. During the 4 years since his puppyhood, he had lived the life of a sated aristocrat. He had a fine pride in himself, was ever a trifle egotistical, as country gentlemen sometimes became because of their insular situation. But he had saved himself by not becoming a mere pampered house dog. Hunting and kindred outdoor delights had kept down the fat and hardened his muscles, and to him, as to the cold tubbing races, the love of water had been a tonic and a health preserver. And this was the manner of dog Buck in the fall of 1897, when the Klondike strike dragged men from all the world into the frozen north. But Buck did not read the newspapers, and he did not know that Manuel, one of the gardener's helpers, was an undesirable acquaintance. Manuel had one besetted sin. He loved to play Chinese lottery. Also, in his gambling, he had one besetting weakness, faith in a system, and this made his damnation certain. For to play a system required money, while the wages of a gardener's helper did not lap over the needs of a wife and numerous progeny. The judge was at a meeting of the Raisin Growers Association, and the boys were busy organizing an athletic club on the memorable night of Manuel's treachery. No one saw him and Buck go off through the orchard on what Buck imagined was merely a stroll, and with the exception of a solitary man, no one saw them arrive at the little flag station known as College Park. This man talked with Manuel, and money clinked between them. "You might wrap up the goods before you deliver 'em," the stranger said gruffly to Manuel, doubled a piece of stout rope around Buck's neck under the collar. "Twist it, and you'll choke him plenty," said Manuel, and the stranger grunted a ready affirmative. Buck had accepted the rope with quiet dignity. To be sure, it was an unwanted performance, but he had learned to trust in men he knew, and to give them credit for a wisdom that outreached his own. But when the ends of the rope were placed in the stranger's hands, he growled menacingly. He had merely intimated his displeasure, and his pride believing that to intimate was to command. But to his surprise, the rope tightened around his neck, shutting off his breath. In quick rage, he sprang at the man, who met him halfway, grappled him close by the throat, and with a deft twist, threw him over his back. Then the rope tightened mercilessly, while Buck, struggling in a fury, his tongue lolling out of his mouth and his great chest panting futilely. Never in all his life had he been so vilely treated, and never in all his life had he been so angry. But his strength ebbed, his eyes glazed, and he knew nothing when the train was flagged and the two men threw him into the baggage car. The next he knew, he was dimly aware that his tongue was hurting and that he was being jolted along in some kind of conveyance. The hoarse shriek of a locomotive whistling a crossing told him that where he was. He had traveled too often with the drudge not to know the sensation of riding in a baggage car. He opened his eyes, and into them came the unbridled anger of a kidnapped king. The man sprang for his throat, but Buck was too quick for him. His jaw closed on the hand, nor did they relax till his senses were choked out of him once more. "Yep, has fits," the man says, hiding his mangled hand from the baggageman, who had been attracted by the sound of struggle. "I'm taking him up for the boss to Frisco. A crack dog doctor there thinks he can cure him." Concerning that night's ride, the man spoke most eloquently for himself in a little shed back of a saloon on the San Francisco waterfront. "All I get is $50 for it," he grumbled, "and I wouldn't do it over for 1,000 cold cash." His hand was wrapped in a bloody handkerchief, and the right trouser leg was ripped from knee to ankle. "How much did the other mug get?" the saloon keeper demanded. "100, was the reply. "Wouldn't take a sow less, so help me." "That makes 150, the saloon keeper calculated, "and he's worth it, or I'm a squarehead." The kidnapper undid the bloody wrappings and looked at his lacerated hand. "If I don't get the hydropulbally, It'll be because you were born to hang, laughed the saloon keeper. Here, lend me a hand before you pull your freight, he added. Dazed, suffering intolerable pain from throat and tongue, with the life half throttled out of him, Buck attempted to face his tormentors, but he was thrown down and choked repeatedly till they succeeded in filling the heavy brass collar from off his neck. Then the rope was removed and he was flung into a cage-like crate. Okay, so I'm going to end there. I'll check back with you guys tomorrow, reading probably the next part of this chapter, probably finishing this chapter. See you tomorrow.